Do you still remember me? A struggling single mom saw her first love at the airport, unaware that he was now a CEO. The snowstorm had grounded flights across the region, and the airport buzzed with anxious energy. The departure boards glowed with delays and cancellations. Lines stretched long and wide, filled with passengers gripping coffee cups and muttering into their phones. The hum of frustration thickened the already cold air. Evelyn moved quickly through the crowd, her ponytail swaying as she dodged travelers. She wore the navy blue uniform of the janitorial crew, the neon safety vest slightly oversized on her slender frame. In her arms, 5-year-old Sophie clung tightly, her little pink dress peeking out beneath a puffy coat, her cheeks flushed with fever. Evelyn whispered softly into Sophie's ear, bouncing her gently while scanning the terminal for the nearest pharmacy kiosk. She needed children's fever medicine, soon. The little girl had been warm to the touch all morning, and now she was starting to shiver. Evelyn's arms ached from holding her, but she kept moving, weaving between scattered luggage and hurried passengers. Focused on the overhead sign pointing to the nearest service desk, Evelyn didn't see the man stepping out of a gateside lounge. She collided hard into him, the side of her cleaning cart scraping his briefcase. Sophie whimpered in her arms. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," Evelyn began, breathless. The man turned. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed immaculately in a charcoal gray suit. His expression was sharp, his eyes dark and calculating. He looked down at her, ready to offer some curt response, until something flickered across his face. Recognition, just for a heartbeat. His eyes narrowed, then widened. His lips parted slightly as if he might speak, but he didn't. He blinked, turned his gaze away, and started to walk past as though she were no one. Evelyn stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest. Adrien. The name left her lips barely louder than a whisper, but it was enough. He halted mid-step. He didn't turn around. Not right away. Sophie stirred in Evelyn's arms, pressing her flushed cheek into her mother's shoulder. Evelyn adjusted her grip and took a small step forward. Her voice trembled. "Do you still remember me?" The words hung in the air like frost. Adrien turned slowly. His face was unreadable now, calm, composed, but his eyes held something else. Surprise, confusion, pain, maybe. He looked at her as if trying to match her face to a memory long buried. Evelyn didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. The weight of the years between them, the silence, the unsaid words, it all crashed in with the simple question she'd asked. For a moment, she saw the past flicker across his face, the boy he'd once been, the man he'd become. Adrien's jaw tightened. His gaze fell briefly on Sophie, then back to Evelyn. The recognition deepened, but he said nothing, without a word. He gave a small nod, barely perceptible, and walked away, his stride smooth and practiced, his back rigid. Evelyn stood still. The airport swirling around her, the world noisy and oblivious. Her heart thudded in her chest, louder than any overhead announcement. So, he did remember, but maybe that was the problem. Once, long before the blinding lights of the airport and the weight of unspoken years, there had only been youth. Evelyn, with her golden hair flowing freely and a second-hand floral dress that danced in the wind, was 19 and believed in poems more than plans. She met Adrien behind the campus library, where he parked his greasy bike and wiped engine oil off his hands before unlocking the staff door. He was in a logistics internship, working night shifts at the city port. His fingernails were always stained, his knuckles told stories of dock work and broken pallets. Their first conversation was about coffee. Evelyn needed caffeine to finish a paper on Shakespeare. Adrien handed her a can of instant from his backpack, apologizing that it was cold. They fell in love over styrofoam bowls of instant noodles, sprawled on library steps or in the back of his truck cab during rainstorms. She read him poems from her coursework. He told her about the supply chains that moved the world, how timing was everything, how a single missed shipment could throw off an entire network. She laughed and said he made boxes sound romantic. They dreamed together. A tiny apartment with a bookshelf and a kettle. Sunday mornings with pancakes and silence. He promised to take her to the coast one day when he had money. She promised she'd wait. Then came the offer. A position in another state. A full-time opportunity with room to grow. He hesitated. She smiled and said, "Go, just come back to me." He kissed her that night behind the campus library. Her fingers curled in his collar like she never wanted to let go. He left for the job 2 weeks later. But things didn't wait. Life didn't pause. Her mother had disapproved from the very beginning. "That boy is just a laborer," she'd sneered. "You'll end up scrubbing floors and watching him come home stinking of oil." Evelyn fought at first, but the pressure built slowly, like fog creeping under the door. Her mother threatened to stop paying her tuition. She called every day, criticizing Evelyn's weight, her grades, even the way she smiled when Adrien texted. One evening, sitting alone with her knees pulled to her chest, Evelyn wrote a letter. She said she was sorry, that she didn't want to hold him back, that maybe their dreams weren't realistic after all. She folded the paper and sealed it with trembling hands. That same night, she left it at his apartment, tucking it into the doorframe just before a summer storm rolled in. Adrien never read it. On his way home from the docks, a delivery truck ran a red light and slammed into his car. He woke up 2 days later in a hospital bed, his body bruised and stitched. By the time he returned to the apartment, the letter was gone. Wind, rain, or chance had carried it away. Evelyn never knew about the accident. Adrien never knew about the letter. He thought she had simply walked away, and she thought he had read her goodbye and agreed. And so they went on with their lives, both believing they were the one left behind. The storm outside showed no sign of calming. By midnight, the airport had turned into a strange, sleepless village. Blankets were passed out in the waiting areas. Families huddled in corners. Kids slept across suitcases. The air buzzed with quiet frustration and the occasional snore. Evelyn sat on a mat near the window wall, tucked away behind the children's play zone. Sophie lay curled beside her, cheeks flushed and forehead damp. She had finally dozed off after hours of fighting the fever. Evelyn gently stroked her daughter's hair and checked the time. She'd need to get more warm water soon. Sophie's medicine would wear off in another hour. And without another dose, the fever might climb. Across the terminal, Adrien declined the lounge attendant's offer once again. He told them his driver was stuck on the freeway and that he preferred to stay out here among the chaos. He didn't say it out loud, but he was restless. He had been ever since he saw her. Evelyn, the girl who once read poetry to him under flickering library lights, now a janitor with a sick child and tired eyes. It didn't make sense, and yet it did. Life did that sometimes. He walked along the terminal, pretending to scroll through emails, but his steps slowed when he saw her again. She was struggling to lift a large water bottle from a cart, trying to replace the empty jug at the public hot water station. Her shoulders strained as she shifted the heavy plastic cylinder, balancing it awkwardly. Before she could tip it, he stepped forward. "Let me." She startled and turned, but he didn't wait for a response. He reached out, lifted the bottle with ease, and secured it into the dispenser. Then he pulled out his own thermal bottle from his coat pocket, filled it with hot water, and handed it to her. "It's still warm. She needs it." Evelyn blinked up at him, startled by the gesture. "You? Why would you?" He didn't meet her eyes. "No need to thank me. I used to get sick every winter. The first year at the docks, I thought I was dying from a fever. My supervisor gave me a mug of boiled water with salt, kept me alive through the shift." She held the bottle closer to her chest, unsure what to say. Adrien gave a small nod and turned to leave, but a soft voice behind them stopped him. Sophie stirred on the mat, rubbing her eyes. Her cheeks were flushed, but her voice was clear. "Mommy, is that the man from your old picture?" Evelyn froze. Her heart thudded as she turned slowly to face Adrien. He stopped walking. The question hovered between them like smoke. Adrien didn't turn fully around. He stood still, his back half turned, shoulders tense. Then after a pause, he looked over his shoulder. His eyes met Evelyn's, and something flickered there. Recognition, conflict, memory. But he said nothing. Not yes, not no, only silence. Then he walked away, his footsteps fading into the hum of the terminal, leaving Evelyn clutching the bottle of warm water and the weight of everything unsaid. Outside, the storm continued its merciless rain. Inside, the airport remained suspended in limbo. Neither day nor night, just waiting. Adrien sat alone near a darkened gate, the leather of the airport chair cool against his back. He had tried reading, emailing, even checking logistics reports from his team. Nothing worked. His thoughts kept circling back, again and again, to her face and the child's voice. He rose, walking with no real direction. That's when he saw her. Evelyn was near the loading zone, dragging a large black trash bag toward a cleaning cart. Her face looked pale in the cold fluorescent light. Her shoulders were hunched, one arm stretched awkwardly as she tried to corral a line of runaway luggage carts with the other hand. A small form sat nearby, legs crossed on a folded blanket, Sophie coughing softly. Her little arms wrapped around her knees. Adrien paused. His instinct was to step forward, but he hesitated. Before he could decide, a man staggered out of the nearby airport bar, half a drink still sloshing in a plastic cup. He kicked one of the carts Evelyn was collecting. "Watch it," the man slurred. Evelyn stopped. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I'll move it." "You dented my suitcase," the man snapped, grabbing the handle of his rolling bag and inspecting it like it was made of glass. "What is wrong with you?" He stepped closer. "Too close." Evelyn raised her hand, signaling peace, but the man slapped her arm away. "You people think you're invisible, cleaning up after others like rats." Sophie began to cry. "Stop," Evelyn said, holding her ground but clearly shaken. "You're just some low-class—" A voice cut through the tension, low but steel hard. "She is a top employee of this airport. If you say another word, I'll call security." Everyone in the area turned. Adrien stood there, coat open, eyes sharp. The drunk man blinked at him, confused. Adrien took a step closer, his gaze never wavering. "Walk away." The man muttered something incoherent and shuffled off, the clatter of his suitcase wheels echoing down the hall. Adrien walked over and knelt beside Sophie. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her pink coat. He looked up at Evelyn. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were wide, stunned. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I couldn't just watch." He stood, hesitated, then placed a light hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch made her blink. After a long silence, Evelyn said, "There's a quieter spot down that hallway. Fewer people." They sat on a bench near the staff lockers, away from the noise. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then she began. "I married someone not long after college. My mother thought it was best. He had money, a real job, not dreams." Adrien listened, hands folded. He was controlling. "Wanted a wife, not a person. When I got pregnant, things got worse. I left when Sophie was 2. Almost lost her in court because I didn't have steady work." He glanced at her. She didn't cry. Her voice didn't tremble. She had passed that stage, it seemed. "Now I live with my mother," she continued quietly. "Work nights. I do what I can." Adrien looked away, his jaw tight. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said finally. "Taking that job, building something for us. I told myself you'd wait." She gave a small, tired smile. "I did. But the world didn't." He looked at her then. Really looked. She had changed, thinner, more worn, but her eyes still held the same light that once made him forget he was covered in machine grease. "Maybe," he said, his voice low. "I left behind more than I realized." She didn't answer. She just looked back at him. No defenses, no blame, only the shared understanding of two people who had once loved deeply and never really stopped. After that night at the airport, Adrien found it impossible to shake Evelyn from his thoughts. Not because of nostalgia, not entirely, but because of the look in her eyes. Something between quiet resolve and exhaustion. He remembered that look. He'd seen it in the mirror years ago, when he was still building his life from the ground up. He didn't approach her again. Instead, he quietly asked one of his assistants to look into the employment records at the airport. The information came back quickly. Evelyn was working as a temporary janitor covering night shifts. No health insurance, no formal contract, no stability. She had been floating from job to job for over a year. He didn't want to make her feel like a charity case, so he didn't. Instead, he asked HR at one of his company's nearby logistics branches to review a new candidate he was personally recommending. He submitted her resume anonymously, along with a note. "Candidate shows exceptional diligence and accountability. Recommend for the warehouse intake and data entry position. Remote onboarding possible. Flexible hours preferred. A few weeks later, Evelyn received an email. It was from a logistics company she had never heard of, but it sounded legitimate. The role? Inventory checker and data input clerk. Office hours were flexible. The location was just 2 train stops away from her apartment. The salary was stable, better than anything she'd had in years. She almost didn't go to the interview. She thought it might be a mistake, but something told her to try. She wore her neatest blouse and old office shoes, then took Sophie to her mother's house. The interview was brief. The manager was polite. Evelyn was honest about her work gaps, about her divorce, about needing some flexibility for her daughter. They told her they admired her transparency. She got the job. On her first day, she arrived early. The warehouse buzzed with quiet order, staff in reflective vests moving cartons, a front desk lined with terminals, and her tiny cubicle tucked just behind it. Her name was printed neatly on a temporary badge. She smiled. Around noon, she noticed something strange. A group of staff near the loading dock suddenly straightened up and murmured, "Sir," as a man in a navy jacket walked past. Tall, broad-shouldered, familiar, Adrien. He didn't stop. He only glanced her way and gave the faintest nod. She wasn't sure if it meant anything. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe not. A few weeks in, she had adjusted well. Her supervisor complimented her precision. She enjoyed the quiet repetition, the feeling of order returning to her life. She no longer had to chase extra shifts. She could cook again, read to Sophie, sleep. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the atmosphere at the warehouse shifted. A senior employee had found a minor error in Evelyn's input, an outdated product code. The man raised his voice, mocking her in front of others. "You people always act like you know everything. If you can't read numbers, maybe this job isn't for you." Evelyn stood frozen, embarrassment rising hot on her face. She was about to apologize when a voice cut through the tension. "Actually," Adrien said from behind the group, "the outdated code was never replaced in the system. If anyone's responsible, it's the software team, or me." Everyone turned. The room stilled. He walked up, calm and composed. Then, looking directly at her, he said, "Next time, report it straight to your supervisor. You did the right thing." The man who had scolded her muttered something and backed off. Adrien didn't stay. He left as quietly as he'd arrived. Evelyn stood there, her breath shallow. She wasn't moved because he defended her. It was the way he said, "You did the right thing," like he trusted her judgment, and the way he still called her name, soft and familiar, as if 9 years had passed in one heartbeat. That night, Sophie twirled around their small apartment, holding up a keychain her mom had given her from the break room vending machine. Guess what? Today, Mommy got her own desk and a computer. Evelyn watched her daughter spin in her pink socks and mismatched pajama top, and something in her chest ached and bloomed at once. She walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. No gifts. No grand gestures. Adrien hadn't offered to fix her life. He had simply given her something much harder to come by: dignity. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn didn't feel like someone struggling to keep up. She felt steady, not because he was there, but because she was finally standing on her own. A quiet Saturday afternoon arrived at the warehouse. The late winter sun slanted through high, dusty windows. The floor hummed with forklifts and rolling pallets. But at one of the data entry desks, something lighter flickered. Laughter. Adrien's visit was unannounced. He had come to inspect processes, check shipment logs, and ensure staff were following updated procedures. He walked along the aisle of desks, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning. Then he paused. One desk was occupied by Evelyn. Her hair was pulled into its usual neat ponytail, blonde strands slipping out from under the office uniform cap. Beside her sat Sophie in a pink dress, one leg tucked up on the swivel chair, giggling and tapping the keyboard with exaggerated beeps. Evelyn smiled, her tired eyes softening. She showed her daughter how to press enter, how to see the numbers change. It was teaching. It was hope. Adrien didn't move closer. He stood behind a pillar of stacked cartons and watched. A CEO used to commanding trucks and global routes felt strangely still. He recalled a younger version of himself, night shifts, frozen docks, the fear of failure. But now, the sound of a child's laugh made his chest tighten. Later that afternoon, after most of the warehouse had emptied for break, Evelyn returned to her station and found a small brown bag on the corner of her desk. No note. No name. Inside were a pair of soft wool gloves and a little amber bottle of eucalyptus oil labeled for wrist relief. Her hands had been aching from the daily keystrokes, the cartons, and the hours of bending. She recognized the handwriting immediately. The swooping A in the corner of the signature matched the same style as the envelope he once left on her dorm window. She touched the gloves lightly, slid them into the pocket of her uniform jacket, and sat back, blinking away a surge of memory. That same week, the cold settled over the city. Evelyn stayed late again. Sophie was restless, hungry, and overtired. When she arrived home, boots creaking on the stairs of the apartment block, she saw something tied to the banister, a plastic bag swaying gently in the wind. Inside were warm containers of rice and soup, and wrapped in foil, grilled fish with rosemary and lemon, the recipe she used to make him back in her college days, when she was struggling through exams and he was scraping by at the docks. A sticky note was attached to the bag. "If you didn't get a chance to eat tonight, I hope this dinner gives you some strength." No signature. She knelt in the stairwell, the unopened container warm in her hand, Sophie's whimpers echoing down the hall. This was more than charity. It was memory. It was care. Adrien was saying something through action. Not sympathy, not rescue, but presence. Evelyn sat in the dark stairwell for a long minute. She realized she was scared. Scared to let this in. Scared to hope again. She didn't want Sophie to be the anchor for a hope that might break. Days later, the warehouse faced an urgent backlog of shipments. The night shift arrived. Pallets clanked. Staff moved quickly. Evelyn and Adrien found themselves paired for the count, unexpectedly. The task required 2 people. During the rush, she misjudged a small carton's weight, and it slipped from her grip. Time slowed. The box spun midair. Adrien lunged, caught it, and set it down gently. He didn't comment. He just looked at her. You're doing okay," she swallowed. "And you're stronger than I thought." Her voice was soft but steady. Then she added, "Actually, there are nights I'm not sure I'm strong. I'm just trying to survive," he nodded. No lecture, just that look. Recognition. Respect. In that moment, the air between them shifted. The gap of years and unspoken regret seemed to make room for something quieter, but real. Evelyn looked away, felt a tear slide down her cheek, and quickly wiped it. She didn't speak of gratitude. She didn't expect confession. She simply let herself stand in a moment where she wasn't alone, where someone knew and still cared. Adrien hadn't changed who he was. But he let her see that the distance between them was no longer safety. It could be closeness. In that warehouse, under harsh lights, surrounded by shipments, spreadsheets and late hours, 2 people who once loved and once lost began to find each other again, not with grand words, but with shared work, silent support, and a slow awakening of something better than fear. When caring is no longer a sin, it becomes a bridge. And that night, they both stepped onto that bridge. After weeks of watching from the sidelines, Adrien realized he couldn't do it anymore. He had built walls around his life, brick by careful brick, but Evelyn had always been the one person who made them feel less like protection and more like a prison. He wanted to step forward now, but he knew she might pull away if he moved too fast. So he took a chance. He sent her an invitation to the 10-year anniversary gala of the company's local branch, the one where he'd be giving the keynote speech. The email was formal. No added words, just the time, the place, and a quiet hope tucked between the lines. Evelyn hesitated. She almost deleted it. But that evening, as she made dinner, Sophie clambered onto the counter and asked, "Are we going to see Mr. Adrien at his big party?" "We weren't planning to, honey, but I want to see him talk. He's the nice man you smile about when you think I'm not looking." Evelyn froze, spoon mid-stir. And that was that. On the night of the gala, Evelyn wore a sea green dress she had kept from her university days. It didn't fit quite the same, but it still made her feel like someone worth noticing. Her blonde hair was tied up, simple and clean as always. No makeup. Just her. Sophie wore her favorite pink dress and the little ribbon clip she had received anonymously on her last birthday. The note that came with it had been unsigned. For the brightest star in the sky. The venue was grander than Evelyn expected. Glass walls, warm lights, laughter echoing through the lobby. She kept to the edge of the room, not looking for Adrien, though her heart clearly was. When the speeches began, the room dimmed, and Adrien stepped onto the stage. He looked calm, composed, sharp in a tailored suit. He began by thanking the logistics crew, the warehouse team, the frontline staff, the hands that moved the things the world never saw. This company didn't grow because of the person in charge, he said, voice steady, but because of the people who showed up every day, the ones who did the right thing, even when no one was clapping. His gaze swept the crowd. Then it paused. I used to believe success meant not looking back, he continued. But it turns out you can run far and still find your past waiting for you. Stronger, braver, and more honest than you remembered. He looked straight at Evelyn. And sometimes, he said softly, it takes a decade to understand that the person you owe the most is the one who once taught you how to be kind. The room went quiet. Some clapped, most just watched. After the event, as guests filtered out, Evelyn stood near the garden exit, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her dress. Adrien walked up slowly, not rushing. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how she was. He just placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and said, I know I don't have the right to ask for the past, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of your present. She looked up at him. The lines around her eyes had deepened with the years, but her smile was just as soft as before. We're not those students sharing instant noodles anymore, she said. No, he agreed. But I still take my tea unsweetened, she laughed, then reached for his hand. No speeches, no promises, just the simple truth of a touch, and the beginning of something they both thought they had lost for good. A while later, Evelyn finally stepped into a role she had only dared to imagine. Warehouse floor manager at the logistics company. The pay was solid, the hours consistent, and it gave her enough confidence to rent a small apartment near Sophie's school. It wasn't grand. 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room, a window that looked out onto maple trees. But for Evelyn, it felt like a turning point. She decorated the space with secondhand finds, a soft sofa she found on sale, a small bookshelf stacked with children's books and her own favorite novels, and Sophie's drawings of pink dresses and big smiles taped above the little desk in the corner. Sophie helped unpack. She placed a stuffed bear on the windowsill and declared, "That's our home bear." Adrien kept the structure of his life: early meetings, global conference calls, spreadsheets full of shipments and deliveries. But now, he carved out moments for them. On many nights, he pulled into the driveway just as the porch light flickered on. He brought home simple things. One evening, bookstore gift cards. Another, 2 muffins fresh from the bakery Sophie loved. He never overshadowed Evelyn's achievements. He just arrived. One Friday evening, Sophie curled up in the small living room with her mother while Adrien washed dishes beside her. The scent of roasted vegetables lingered in the air. Evelyn picked up the remote and paused a documentary about engineering routes. Adrien stood by the sink and asked softly, "Do you two want dessert?" Sophie looked up at her mother, eyes wide, then giggled. "Muffins!" Together they walked into the kitchen, the 3 of them under the warm light. It was everyday magic. On a Saturday morning, they went to the park. The sky was pale blue, the early sun gentle. Sophie raced ahead, her pink dress fluttering like a banner of joy. Evelyn and Adrien walked hand in hand, their steps slow and easy, matching each other's rhythm. Evelyn glanced at him, hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Do you remember the first time we met again, after all those years, at the airport?" Adrien smiled, the tension around his eyes softening. "When you asked, 'Do you still remember me?' I didn't know what to say," he admitted. Evelyn paused, then asked, "And now?" He looked into her eyes, so clearly they seemed to reflect the sunlight between them. "Now I remember," he said, "and I don't want to forget again." Sophie came running back, tugging at both their hands. "Let's go, my team!" she cheered. The three of them laughed together, their shadows stretched across the lawn, joined together in one unbroken line. They walked toward new adventures, toward quiet mornings and shared dinners, toward a life built not on what was lost, but on what they chose to keep. If Evelyn and Adrien's story moved you from heartbreak to healing, then you understand the quiet power of love and kindness that gives without asking. Their journey wasn't built on grand gestures, but on small, steady acts that restore trust and rewrite what once felt lost. At Kindness and Love Tales, we share stories like this, reminding you that it's never too late to say, "I'm sorry," offer a warm meal, or hold the hand you once let go. We celebrate resilience, forgiveness, and the beautiful mess of being human. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, subscribe now. Join a growing community that chooses tenderness over drama, strength over pride, and love that somehow finds its way back, even in silence. More heartfelt stories await you. Ones that might bring a few tears, a few smiles, and the quiet reminder that love always lingers, patiently waiting to be found again.